Yeah, hi there. Welcome to lesson 5 in module 3. And we're looking at two powerful commands, two commands that you will use. Maybe you use one more than the other, but there are things that you will definitely need someday in your career. Just the fundamentals again. And there are just two, generate and clonevar. So I will just go on straight to the main uh, command without wasting time. So what generate does is just creates a new variable. And you may ask, why do we need to create a variable? We have been given all the variables, and I'll just explain that shortly. I intend to do a video, so just subscribe to this channel where I explain why we sometimes generate. In fact, there are certain commands in their options automatically they generate. But I will just say here, basically, sometimes a variable gives us information about another variable and maybe in another format. But basically, it's to help us have a better understanding. But usually, the raw material, usually and most of the time, is from another variable. So let's look at the syntax quickly. So the syntax is very straightforward. It's generate or gen or g new var, and I use that word very carefully, a new variable equals to expression. That expression could be a variable, it could be a number, it could be a string, it could be a date. That's what's interesting. So let's just give examples. So generate new var equals to 1, gen new var equals to 1, g new var equals to 1. We've talked about abbreviations in module 2. So all this will give you the same results. Now let's quickly look at it and contrast with Clonevar. So Clonevar does not just create any variable. It looks for a variable and creates, let's use the word, a photocopy. The only thing different, a clone is the name. So if a particular name of a variable is var1 and you clone var2, it takes all the characteristics of that variable. And we're going to see this in our practical session shortly. So one duplicates a variable, but one creates stuff. So we'll just try and see in the practical session where we can use one and where you cannot use probably the other. So the syntax is also quite straightforward. Unlike generate, it says clone new var equals to var name, so it must be referring to a variable. Clone var does not work except you are referring to something that already exists within the dataset. But generate can work with or without variables. It can extract information from a variable, but it does not necessarily need to take everything. So Clonevar is the photocopy of Stata commands, especially for variable names. So a very clear example here is Clonevar sex equals to gender. So it takes all the attributes of gender. The only thing that is different between these two variables is their name. Everything is in sync, and probably the order in which they appear in the dataset. Every other thing is in sync. So if it's a categorical variable, it captures the definitions and everything. So we're going to show you how this works shortly in our practicals too. So we'll give you opportunity, at the end of this module to really do a bit of experimenting and playing around and building foundation for the tougher stages that lie ahead. So I hope this has been useful. Let's see in the practical session shortly. So hi there, welcome to lesson 5 practical session. So I am here again with the sys use auto file, the auto file. So my sys use command is there with the clear, and it gives me the file you are seeing by your left in the data editor mode. So we just want to look at practical ways of applying generate and then generate and then clonevar. Pardon me. Now, quickly, let's look at a few variables here. So, and I like the fact that as you move from variable to variable, currently we are on the length column. it tells us what it is. So this is length in inches, but the turn cycle is in feet. So length in inches, turn cycle in in inches. So maybe, to be able to find out if it's a feat, the car is okay, or the data about all the cars that should be evaluated, you need to turn inches into feet. Now, this is what we talk about domain knowledge. I'll talk about it more and more and more as we move on, because I said this is applicable to any industry: agriculture, entertainment, health, education. So we need to know some basic maths principle. That's where I'm going to. And one of the things I know is that 12 inches is equal to 1 feet. So that's what we call domain knowledge. And this is one thing every data manager must apply himself to. So the goal now is to change the length from inches into feet. But you still want to keep the variable for length. So what I could do is say generate length underscore feet equals to length divided by 12. Length underscore feet equals to length divided by 12. So it creates an additional variable. But before we run this, let's first look at the variables that come with the auto data set. There are 12 variables and 74 observations. This is what comes by default with the data set. Now, what happens is that every time you use the gen command or the clonevar command, and of course, certain commands that have generate as options, what we have is an increase in our number of variables. So when we are done, these variables will increase to 12. So like I mentioned in data management, sometimes in order to prepare the data for evaluation, you may need to do some conversions like what I'm doing now. So length is a numeric number. And why I know it because it's black, so I can do a mathematical review on it. So gen length underscore feet equals to length divided by 12. So just converting length in inches into feet. So I will run this quickly. Now when I run, I have 13 variables, but where is length underscore feet? I need to scroll to the end of the data set by the right hand side. So after foreign, if you remember very well, recollect very well, foreign was the last variable, but length underscore feet has been added just at the end. Now you may not like that, that desire. Many people always having problems with where the file was generated. You may want it to just be after the length in inches. So let's go back to length here. So you want the variable to appear just after, so you can even compare visually. So what you can do is create an option called after length. Now I've talked to you about options. So I don't know if you're advanced and you had known this, but it allows you to bring the variable to the end. Just before, just after length variable. So when I run now, let me do that running now. When I run now and scroll to length, I will discover that it is just after. So there's length and there's length underscore feet. This happens right after the variable length. So the first length is in inches, the second length is in feet. So one thing is clear, and this is not exactly what we're supposed to do for this training, but every time you create a new variable, you need to now give it a label. Now the label for this new variable is missing that we just created. So we would say label variable length, underscore feet, and that will now be length in feet. Space. So you can't label a variable until it's existent or created. So there we have it now. If we look at our variable section, we have the one in inches and the one in feet. If you scroll to the left hand side, you see that they're side by side, and of course that's even the experience. Double clicking on the variable, we would find it right beside length. So that's how you do generate. Now generate is powerful. It has many variants. So I did a division, I could do a multiplication. For example, there could be a variable that is length, and then there's a variable that is breadth, and then I'll do area. So I could create something from something, but most of the time you do that. Sometimes you just put in an expression, and you can do it also based on conditions. There's an if condition for generate. So generate if this condition is met. It means if the condition is not met, all the other options will be missing. So let's quickly look at Clonevar. Clonevar just basically duplicates. So I say Clonevar. Let's do that for cost. I will call price cost. So I want to create another variable called cost, but it's just cloning price. So I say Clonevar cost equals to price, and I run. So if I go to the end of the data set, I'll find cost there. So that is the variable that has been cloned. Now what you have observed that it's even cloned its label. The label of price was price. Now cost shares the same label. Like I said, when it is cloned, there are two things. Everything is duplicated except two things. The order, that cannot be shared within the data set, because right now cost can be found at the end of the data set. Price can be found at a certain position within the data set. It's the second variable. Cost, I think, is the 13th or 14th variable right now. So that's the only thing. Every other thing, the label, the value set, everything is copied. So that's how it works. But if I had said gen cost 2 equals to price, which is similar, have similar syntax. I want you to compare cost 1 and cost 2. If I say gen cost 2 equals to price instead of Clonevar, what I find is that yes, we'll have the same values, but now look at something here. There was a format in cost. It had a comma for every 1,000 separation, but here it does not have a comma. So Clonevar, I will repeat, copies everything, the attributes, the formats, and that's how it works. Let's make it clearer again. I'm going to use generate out for the foreign, which is domestic and foreign, what type of car it is. So I would say generate global equals to foreign. We had done this in a previous lesson, so if you've been following the sequence, you should not have a problem relating to this. So we just changed the value labels, I think 2 lessons ago. Okay, so let's look at it now. Gen global equals to foreign. Now I scroll to the end of the data set, because every time you create a new, you create a variable, or you generate a variable, it by default goes to the end of the data set. Now watch, this is foreign here, and this is global here. So it just copied the value, but all the formatting, all the labels, they're not there. Yes, domestic has a value of 0 if you look at it, but it just copies the value without the labels and the format. So also, if you look at cost 2 and global, there are no labels there. So let's clone global 2 now. Clone var clone, not spelled rightly. Clone var global 2 equals to foreign. So when you use that, what we find is that everything is cloned. So you can see, let's scroll down a bit to the left. So you see domestic, and everything formatted. Not only that, the label that it had, it still keeps car origin. This is for global 2. This is for global 1. I mean, this is global. So I'm sure you are able to see the difference now. Now, Clonevar has limitations. Clonevar just copies. It's not into manipulation. It doesn't do addition, subtraction like you found with generate. Generate equals to an expression. So please note these differences. And the thing about it is that when I begin to give you exercises, you are able to finish yours faster than your colleague, because the guy who does global will first go and look for value label definitions and all that stuff. But the guy who cloned already is ready to go, has gotten everything he needs. So that's how this thing works. Basically, that's how it works. So please take note to this, of these subtle differences. If you use Clonevar, you don't need to label, especially if you are cloning. It's the same thing. You may now need to tweak it maybe for your own thing. You don't need to label variables. You don't need to label value sets, or what we call the label definition. Everything just comes. Like I told you, just the name and probably position within data set. And those things cannot be contested. Even though you are twins, you still have slight differences in your DNA. So bottom line, this is what you'll find when you use Clonevar and generate. Like I told you, the power of generate is you're able to do some processing, manipulation. Clonevar is just simply duplicate. Duplicate everything about that data set. Duplicate the color, duplicate the style, duplicate the format, duplicate the label. Copy everything. So that is how it works. So basically, I guess that's it. So please take some time to rehearse. Take another variable here. Use what I've used. I tell people, get comfortable with it. Then now be adventurous. Start checking other things you can do, other things you can tweak, and I'm sure you'll enjoy the experience. So thank you so much. I will see you in lesson 6.